So, thanks so much, Libby, for jumping on. For those of you who don't know Libby, at Libby Property on Instagram, you changed it from
Property
Box
with
Hill
Libby.
Properties. Property with Libby. It was
Yeah,
Box Hill Properties to begin with, was it not?
yeah, it
I
was. Yeah,
think
I
so.
changed it
Yeah,
recently.
I said changed it. So, 21-year-old property investor has already bought and sold her first flip, or flip is in legals, just to be clear, but is in the process of selling. So, fingers crossed for her. Has done one rent to SA deal. You've grown your social media massively as well, and you've spoken at many events. You spoke at Steve Hamilton. You spoke at all sorts of things. So, I think it's very impressive. So, if you, Libby, were to kind of go back to the start and then we can talk about your whole journey into property. Um, where would you say the interest started from you, from like your earliest years to start to be an entrepreneur?
Um, do you know what? It's an interesting question because I was thinking about this the other day with my best friend. Since college, so I left school at 16, went to do
Mm.
business college from 16 to 18, and in those
Okay.
years, I started reading books, started watching YouTube videos about like these property millionaires, and it started from then. And I always knew I wanted my own business, didn't know in what, but I used to think, oh, I'm just going to invest in property in the future at some point.
Hmm.
And then sort of spiraled, left college. I was working in retail at the time. And I used to be like on the shop floor thinking, oh, imagine like renovating a property or like and selling it. And I used to start like thinking about it. And then I'd like go home from working in retail and be like Googling this stuff and like watching videos and whatever.
Mm.
Lockdown hit and I was just obsessed with self-development books and watching stuff online. And then it went from there really, because it was only like, I'd say a year later,
Yeah.
um, I was like, I need to get into property. I don't know how, but I need to do it. So I
Right.
actually printed my CV like 5 times and I just went in estate agents and I was like handing out this CV and being like, look, if you ever get any work, then I'd love to just be in property. Got 2 interviews that day and 2 offers for jobs like that week. And I took one. So I started as well, property manager really. I was in the letting side. But I realised like this isn't where you get money. Like this is the trap. This is salary.
Yeah.
So started the networking events, started looking at rent to rent, and then it sort of kicked off from there. Like I changed companies and I still sort of help out there part time just to get out the house, like a
Yeah.
day and a half a week. And then I got the rent to SA, so that is my first proper move. And it wasn't
Hmm.
like a quick, all of a sudden, like drop your job and get into property. It was something I
Yeah.
think that as I look back, it gradually I started to become educated around it and got into it. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I just think my journey it has been special, and I've learned so much, like from property management, lettings, the rent to SA, sourcing, and now obviously the flip. So I do feel like I know so much about it, and do you know, like
Mm.
I enjoy it. Like I really do enjoy it.
Okay, so I think that's a very interesting thing to take on. So you wouldn't say like from the ages of like, let's say 5 to 15, there was any of that like, if you look back on it now, obviously being where you were at now, did you ever think like, oh, you had that entrepreneurial spirit or fight in you, or that only came later?
It hit me so I failed my mocks when I was doing my GCSEs.
Right.
I failed them big time, and I remember coming home and I was like, "Oh, mum, what am I gonna do? Like this isn't good. Not naturally clever at all.
Hmm.
Like struggled with reading. I could never like follow stuff, and really
Right.
struggled to be honest with school with like passing. And I think failing it, I think from the fear,
Right.
I literally like I was so young, but I just locked in and I just studied and studied just to pass these exams. I knew I never wanted to go to uni. Like there was never ever that. I remember being
Mm.
in college and everyone was like filling out, is it a I can't even remember what it's
UCAS
called.
application.
That.
Yeah.
And I started
Yeah.
doing it and I was halfway through it and I thought, do you know what? Sod this. I'm never gonna go. I'm not doing this. I
Right.
don't want to do uni.
Mm.
And then I think because I'd spent so long doing my GCSE revision and then I'd passed them, and I'd
Mm.
actually done really well. Like I'd come out with some A's and stuff. It was my mum
Yeah.
on results day was like, "What on earth?" Um, and then I think that's when I realised that you have got to work hard at times. But
Mm.
I was coming out of school with this piece of paper. I was like, "These aren't going to do anything. Like these numbers on a sheet." And like I think that also my mum I think clocked on then like she's quite a driven person here. Like she's not just out with her friends. Like when it needed to happen, she really knuckled down. And I did have my first business straight out of school. So I was 16 and it was a homeware company. So I think it was prior to lockdown and I used to like I built this website and I used to like make candles and wax melts and stuff at home, and I'd like buy these like vases and all sorts, and I used to just do it on Instagram and like come home and package the orders whilst working part-time in retail. And I think I realised like quickly, like I love having my own thing,
Yeah.
but that business just really struggled. Like it's such a saturated market, is that homeware thing, and I think unless you give it 100% of your time, and it just wasn't something that I was enjoying as time went on, and so that stopped. But it was such a good teacher, so I did technically have my first business back then, which was
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, I think there's a couple key points there in the fact that actually, I think one thing that entrepreneurs as a given take on is that like is that driven factor. So like, for example, I didn't do very well in school either until I got to my A levels. So I didn't even lock in at GCSEs. I hadn't made that connection yet. I did like mediocre. Um,
Yes.
but then when I went to my A levels, I got straight A's because I just like I did three things and I was so driven and enjoyed it so much. And I think that's one thing that like if you have that entrepreneurial spirit in you, like you've talked about, you've just said like I just realized I had to work hard, and you just locked in and did it, and that's a
Yeah.
super valuable thing where you can start to see those traits. And then moving on from that, when you kind of, you said there, you were like, oh yeah, I started in college, but actually you had that drive in you before then as well because you'd already
Yeah.
started your first business. And what were some of the key lessons or takeaways you think that you learned in that process, whether it was just a year or so, that actually have helped you in your property journey?
Um, I think it's the cliche ones, but it's like
Mm.
um, sacrifice. I remember it was Christmas Eve, and my next door neighbour didn't have any Christmas presents for a granddaughter or something, and I was there Christmas Eve. I'd come home from wherever early with my family, and I was there making wax melts for her. Like I'd literally given up my evening to do it, to sell them to her, and I remember that very clearly because my parents aren't entrepreneurial really at all. They're sort of like just want, normal life, 9 to 5, which is nothing wrong with that at all. That's their choice. That's what they want to do, but they're just not the same as like what I'm going for.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you doing that?" And they just didn't understand. So I think sacrifice, taking risks. I think obviously it was like low risk looking at compared to like the scale of some businesses, but like if you're trying like a new product or you're giving something a go or you're getting yourself like on social media, like it is a bit risky and scary. If you like
Yeah.
ordering stock, you don't know how it's going to be. And I think just hard work, like just going for it. Like honestly, my family think I'm crazy. They still think I'm crazy. They talk about me, and my brother will be like, "Oh, we were saying that we think you're mad, like for that you're doing now." Like they actually do think I'm crazy sometimes, but I think I'm quite like I calculate risk, but then I go for it, and I think that is a good lesson I learned early on,
Mm.
and just like not being scared of hard work because when I was younger, I remember so clearly like my first job. I was either 13 or 14, and it was at this like kennels, and the things I used to do and deal with around animals, like I used to get up at like 6 in the morning, get there for 7,
Right.
this like horrible place, like £3.50 an hour or something daft. And all my friends would be like at McDonald's down the road, and I'd be there like working in like whatever weather and temperatures, like long days. And I think that early on taught me, and then that has sort of like transferred in, and all these
Right.
lessons combined, I think now I apply and I use every single day. And I just think my mindset is like it's so strong around work and business. It's crazy. Like if anything ever goes wrong, I'm immediately thinking, what's the lesson or what's the positive? I never ever
Mm.
just sit there and think. Like, I rarely crumble. Like it's got to be pretty bad to crumble, and at that point, I'm too busy about getting out of the problem that I'm distracted anyway. So that was taught
Yeah.
early on.
No, I think that's amazing to hear. I think one of the things that I heard recently was like, it's not about it's how quickly a problem you can deal with a problem that affects you. So like you said, you never crumble. So even if something like really bad happens, if it takes you 2 hours to get over it and then go out and resolve it, that shows the resolve of a human being and like how much they've got behind them. So I think you've got that as well. Um, and I think one thing that you touched on there, which I think a lot of people might find interesting or would like to hear about, is so how do you go about navigating that relationship with your family where, in probably the most respectful way, because it's not that you're by any means unsuccessful, but they're
Yeah.
calling you bonkers in the most respectful way and the loving way. How do you go about navigating that, and how did you find it to begin with in that journey as well?
It's hard and it's still hard. My dad sat me down the other night and gave me a bit of a lecture because they
Okay.
just don't want me to look back and be like, you've got like no memories, or like you should have lived your life more, because I do. But the thing is, they don't understand that I actually enjoy working, and I'm someone that like sat around goes crazy if I'm not. But I think with them, they only want the best for me, but because they've had a different life where they've gone out with their mates, or they've been on like multiple holidays, or they've just been like excited for the weekend, like that's not the life I'm sort of trying to create. And I think it's hard for me to try get across to them where I want to be in like 5-10 years. And if I do tell them, they almost think I'm like, I haven't got a clue and I'm delusional. And it's a bit difficult to, I think when they're giving me their thoughts, I almost just nod along and say, yeah, no, I understand. I don't always try explain, because I've tried, and I think if I spend too long there, I start to self-doubt, and I think that's when we've got a problem. I mean, both my grandmas they really do worry about me. Because I think they just think like you're gonna burn yourself out. And I'll be honest, I have made myself poorly before. Like I've been in the doctors like from like exhaustion and stuff, but it's my own fault and I'm learning, and they just worry about that. So it's all comes from worry. But I think I just try reassure them and say, look, I'm fine. I enjoy it, and then I just like move on to the next topic. Because otherwise they worry. It's like my nan used to watch my YouTube vlogs and she'd be like, you're doing so much, Libby, like you need to chill, and she just don't get it. So I sort of just try to say, I'm fine, like leave me to it.
No, I think that's interesting. I think how you navigate those relationships, because everything that I think with parents or grandparents or whatever, everything they're trying to say to you is that comes out of a place of love, right? Like
Yeah,
they want what's
yeah.
best for you, and you know they are like, Libby, we just want what's best for you, but almost how you feel what you want and what you want is best for you actually doesn't necessarily always align with their vision of what they
Yeah.
think is best for you. So what do you say, like obviously now I think it might be a slightly easier transition for you, because you can say like, look, I've got this to back me up, I've done a flip, I've done the rent to rent, you know, I am, you know, pretty much full-time in property.
Yeah.
When you were first starting out, to someone who's sat there, let's say they're sat there in their bedroom right now and they're watching this and they're going like, my dad is going to give me a rollicking if I leave my job or I drop out of uni to go into business or property full-time. What is the kind of advice or couple lines that you would tell them on like, this is exactly what you should do to navigate that situation?
I think there's two things to it, which I stand by. You either live with the regret of not doing it, or you just get on with it and do it. Both are painful. How much does it matter? And I think the other thing is, it's hard. I think ultimately, if you don't do it, it's you living with that regret. As much as people can be there for you and support you and pat you on the back and say it's all right, like you did your best, it was the right decision, it's you living with that regret. And my God, it's a horrible feeling. I've had it, and I think no one is ever going to fully understand or be in that feeling like you. So no one's got you like you. If it's something you want to do, go do it, go all in. And if you've got people telling you you're bonkers, use it as motivation. Like just go for it. If it's that important, it's not going to be easy, but life isn't easy. And I just think I'm quite like that, though. I'm quite willing to do that. And I remember like when I handed my notice in, my mum and dad didn't comment really. They didn't comment. They didn't want to comment because they thought, oh, she's gonna, like, either way she's gonna hold us against it. So they won't comment, but I could tell they were thinking I was like, it was a silly idea. Now, because I've got some stuff coming up which I potentially will talk about, they're like, we finally back you. Like, we've seen consistently that you're actually like, you're doing all right. Like,
You do what you say you're going to do,
yeah,
and that's what matters.
yeah, and somehow I'm still here, I'm still alive, I'm still doing well, I'm making money. So they're quite like, we trust you now. But there is a time that it comes in where they're like, are you actually living your life? Like, obviously now, summer, people are going on holiday. I've got multiple people like, we need to book a holiday. And I'm like, yeah, thinking, how can I just go away and not work? Like,
See, this is a like maybe you can give me some advice here because this is a one thing I really struggle with is I've been I'm very fortunate in that like so my dad lives in Thailand, so I'm going to Thailand for 3 weeks in August. I'm going to Sweden with my girlfriend. I'm also going to Italy with my girlfriend because her family's Swedish. So like I've got all these holidays coming up, and it's amazing. It's very hard to. Sorry, I thought someone would cut that out. It's very hard to kind of like to be like, oh yeah, like I don't want to go on holiday, like because so many people don't get those opportunities,
Yeah.
and it's I think
Yeah.
it's a very hard thing. It's one thing I'm trying to navigate very much. Is like,
Mm.
how do you kind of say like, no, I kind of just want to have my routine, sit at my desk and work. I don't want to go to Italy or I don't want to go
Yeah.
to Sweden, and it's a very hard thing to do sometimes.
It
And
is
like,
hard.
I want to go on those trips. I want to have a good time, but I just have that there's a nagging in the back of my brain of like I'm not as excited as I should be is probably the better way to put it.
Yeah, it's
Um,
so hard, isn't it? Um, I guess if you're gonna go and you're going regardless, you may as well go and have the best
yeah,
time.
I've already booked it, but
Yeah, that's
that's
it.
a. I think it's a tough thing to kind of um, navigate. Is that
Navigate.
like your certain people who are in you in that in your clique of life that your
Mm.
friends, your family, whatever they kind of they might not get it, and that's quite hard for them to like for you to be like, yeah, I don't want to go on holiday, don't want to do this, and like
Yeah.
I can very much relate. You talked about so I've dropped out of university twice, not once but
Oh,
twice. So
right.
so the first time I dropped out of university was I dropped out of university to um, I had been offered a degree apprenticeship at Amazon. Um, so I didn't drop out with a backup plan, but I kind of dropped out of university being something very conventional. Like I was at a good university to do something slightly more unconventional, which was like a degree apprenticeship at the time.
Mm.
And my dad, I remember my mum kind of backed me, but like that kind of worked because my mum's in my business now. She's got that entrepreneurial in her, but my dad, especially the fact he lives at the time lived in the US, and I remember ringing him up and I was like, oh yeah, I'm dropping out of university because I'm taking this offer at Amazon, and and it was like it's one of those conversations where he was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But he kind of like, and then the second time where I left my Amazon degree apprenticeship, um, and it's to kind of be in property full time. I mean, at that point we were doing pretty well in our property business, so it wasn't as much of a hard like what are you doing, but like I went like my Amazon degree apprenticeship for most people was a dream. Like I was on 40K a year. I worked like 4 days a week. I had a day off on Fridays to do like study days. I had
Yeah.
a love like it was for most people like that's a dream opportunity, an
Yeah, yeah,
apprenticeship. And I
absolutely.
worked really, really hard to get that in the first place from dropping out when I like dropped out of university. But
Mm.
for me, that was never enough. And I think that's part of that entrepreneurial fight. But I know you talked about essentially not going to university. Um, I didn't have that foresight to realize that university wasn't actually for me. How did you know to make that decision? Because again, I think it's super important for young entrepreneurs who are probably again sat in their bedroom watching this going, I'm in my A levels or I'm on my gap year and I'm not sure if I want to go to university. How did you know?
Um, do you know, I think it was such like a close thing of events at the time because I'd obviously done so well in my GCSEs and all my family were like, oh my God, like this is crazy. And I think at that point we all realised like actually she is a bit of a like she's a workhorse if she has to be because I literally just went flat out to pass these blooming exams and I'd actually come out well.
Yeah,
And I think because I'd put so much effort into studying, and I just remember at the time studying thinking, this is just a memory test, this isn't even educational, like, this is ridiculous. And in lockdown, so this is when I was in college, so prior to going to uni, I read books, which a lot of them were anti university, a lot of them were like entrepreneurial, business, experience, and probably taught me quite early on that that's probably the best route. Then I started looking into uni because you hear your friends are going to uni, you start
yeah,
thinking, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I had the Homeware company at the time, and I just kept thinking, like, even if this isn't the business, like, I don't want to do uni, I want to do my own thing, like, or I want to work and learn. And I started looking at degrees, and I just remember thinking, you couldn't pay me to do one of these, and I'm paying to go.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to, at this point, property had spiraled in my head. And I'm like, what can you even do in property? And it was, the main one was surveying, really, which my best friend actually does. And just didn't click with it. I just really didn't click with the idea of uni. And then she actually did a degree apprenticeship. And even that, I just didn't love the idea, because it just associated to like this corporate world that I just was never going for. And I remember I'd done work experience, actually. This is an interesting one. I'd done work experience at Jet2, random. But I was in like the head office and I was like around finance and loads of stuff. And I remember like the actual CEO, I can't remember his name, but he came in this room. Well, I was completely like not even thinking about what I was being taught by these people working there for work experience. And I was just like straight to this CEO and I was chatting to him and I'm like having this conversation with this big guy that obviously is so involved in Jet2 and like the stress and stuff. And he's telling me I'd been up at 3 a.m. because at this time, I think one of the big airlines or something had like gone bust, or Thompson's, I
Right.
can't remember, but he'd been dealing with that and he was telling me.
Yeah, Thompson's went bust a couple of years ago. So
Yeah. And
yeah.
I was in the head office as it was all going on, and I remember like speaking to the CEO, and he was asking me all about like my GCSEs or whatever, little me, nobody. And I remember coming away from the conversation thinking, I don't want to be one of these, like just in a job, like they've gone to uni and they're doing accounting or something. Again, no disrespect for anyone doing that, that's their choice and it's great. And I thought,
Yeah.
I want to be the owner here. Like I want to own this. I want the stress. I want the lifestyle. I want to be that like obsessed. And it was just like a accumulation of things where I was like, no, I don't think he went to uni, so you're not going. And I started reading success stories and like I just was like studying and like what is the recipe to them doing well in life. So uni slowly weaned out has not even been an option, and I just thought it's
Yeah.
pointless.
No, I think that's fair enough. I think it is interesting if you read a lot of the success stories. Either it's, there are a lot of successful people who went to uni. I think I would, like you said, I would never caveat and say, don't go to university. I think it's just, don't go to university if you're not sure, because that's what I did. I went to university, and even before I went, I was like, the course I was doing was business, and I was like, oh, should I change to like politics or philosophy or politics and economics? Because I just wasn't sure about my course.
Yeah.
And I think the real thing was for me was actually I just wasn't sure about university. And I think that's the key thing of like, don't dig yourself into that and make that commitment if you're not sure. But
Yeah,
if you're going where you are sure and you want to be an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, 100% I think it's worth it. But it's interesting where you see like, the mega success. Your Bill Gates, your Zuckerbergs. They've all dropped out. Given they've
yeah,
dropped out of like Harvard. So I'm not ever going to claim that I'm Bill Gates or Zuckerberg. But the point is like these people end up doing this thing, the traditional route, and then
yeah,
expand beyond that.
yeah, definitely.
So as your kind of journey started to develop, you're not going to university, you've started going into property, you started reading books, etc. You've almost had your first business and your entrepreneurial idea. How did you then know to, wouldn't say quit, but make the switch? So make the switch from like having this homeware candle business to being like, right, I'm now going to start to go in property. And then what was that journey into the property industry and sector like?
So the bit I missed out when I got my first job in the letting agents was the company I worked for, which at the time I had the homeware company. So I was running that alongside working for this letting agents, and that letting agents was respectfully hell. Like it was hell. And
Right.
it's funny because a lot of the people I used to work with stalk my LinkedIn and you can see the profiles and they see like that I'm actually developing properties, and I think there are a few people like when I used to say like that's what I'm gonna do, because at this point I was really getting obsessed. So at this point I'm like going on the networking events and I'm thinking, yeah, never mind working in a letting agents, to do property how you want to do it and to make the money you have to be in it. So then at this point I'm like, but you can't go into it if you've still got this homeware company, which I'd slowly started to sacrifice because I was so busy in this letting agent's job, which was so intense. It was unbelievable. Like it was crazy how this company was with staff and like the hours you'd put in. Like I used to go in sometimes at 8:15. I didn't start till 9. I didn't take a dinner, nearly blew my car up going round on my visits and appointments, and I'd leave late, and it was just like ridiculous.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that because as someone who works on the other side, I rent a lot of properties.
Yeah.
But I always have thought that being a letting agent has to be one of the worst jobs and one of the worst business models because, like, I see you put in insane hours, you work on the weekends, you kind of have to be in the beck and call of everyone, and you also don't get paid that much. But I've never sat on the other side of it, so I've always kind of wondered why. But share some light on that.
Yeah, it is literally what you've said. And the thing is, of course, you don't have to be qualified or there's no like things you got to pass really for estate agencies. It's quite like anyone can go into it. And realistically, it is an office job that's in property. Like, it's nothing glitz and glam. And I went into it just to get the experience. But it is like you say, you're dealing with, I mean, and I'm still technically part-time in lettings for a lovely company who I really love, I enjoy working for. I would bend over backwards for them. But the previous company, how I started, oh God, you're just dealing with blooming mould, landlord don't want to pay anything, tenants not paying rent or not letting you in to do your inspections, like just drama. And I remember, obviously, I was only 18 at the time, and I didn't really get. The company didn't, I don't think, take care of the staff very well. So I was just literally trying to learn my first ever proper job, learn this really intense job because I was literally, you know, when you move out of a rental and you get your deposit back.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was sent out to assess the property and mark down anything not right. So then I was dealing with all the negotiations, and I used to have like tenants screaming on the phone at me or like saying, I'm not paying that, or I'm getting cleaners in ready for the next tenancy, and they're like, no, I spent hours cleaning my house, and it's like, well, you clearly didn't, it's not good enough. And like I was the one dealing with all the arguments and like arranging any works in between, decorators, like carpet fitters, cleaners, all that. And it was really hard. Like, I think because it was such the negative part of lettings. So it, you know what, hats off to anyone that does it full time because it is a graft and it is hard. Like, I think you've got to be quiet to deal with, because you're a middleman for tenants and landlords, and they want often different things. Like, it's rare for them to both like
be aligned,
want the same things, and but you're paid by the landlord, but the tenant gives you more rubbish. So it's like, it is a difficult one. But I do think you learn a lot, and I think I look back and I'm like, God, really? At the time, it was quite nice just finishing at 5, going home, and you know. But I'm like, I can't think like that because there was once upon a time when I'd be like, I just want to be in property. I just want to be in property myself. It didn't help that my boss at the time was, I'm not afraid to say it, he was pretty shocking, to be honest with you. Like,
I think I've worked with some very bad but also some amazing agents over the time. I think a lot of it is like what you're talking about there is obviously you've got the tenancy side, landlords. I think it's a company culture thing as well. Like, there's a lot of very like you said, now you've got a letting agency you work with and you bend over backwards for them, and it's a company culture thing that then you attract a certain, let's say, market, and that market can be very cheap landlords or it can be problematic tenants. And I think one thing that would be interesting to touch on, actually, having you worked in that segment, is, you know, there's this massive discourse at the moment between our landlords, horrible people, you know, our tenants, having worked with both parties, and like what your kind of views on that are of like, obviously landlords are being heavily demonized. Obviously there's tenants who don't pay rent. There's the renters reform bill coming in. What are your thoughts on that market and that kind of sphere?
Do you know what? I feel like neither party is to blame, and it's like all this legislation and this renters reform bill and stuff, it's essentially whatever they enforce is going to have a knock-on effect. So I think landlords are finding it really difficult and seeing if it's even worth their investment. I see a lot of them trying to offload and get rid of them, which either impacts, well, the landlord's been affected by it, who is essentially been affected by it primarily because it's working against them. They either sell up or they have to increase the rent. They're the two main primary things that they do to try neutralise the problems. Increasing the rent gives you a load of headache. Tenants are like, oh, the cost of living, everything's so expensive. Like, you increased it last year, all this load of rubbish, which, fair enough, it's expensive for tenants. And that they often comment and say, I'm paying more than miles more than a mortgage would be. I get it. It's a lot of money. Rents are high. They are high, and I'm in an area where they do seem to be exceedingly high. Or they sell. So then it has the effect of tenants saying there's no properties available, or they're going to a viewing and there's like 6 people viewing it at the same time and they're getting like multiple applications because there's no properties available and there is a shortage of housing. And that then obviously then spirals back to the rent increase because landlords can charge what they want. So I think for landlords to make it worth them doing, they're having to charge more rent, or they're having to box clever or possibly completely exit. And that is impacting tenants anyway. So this renters reform bill, maybe it is going to work in tenants' favour in some aspects, but is it actually? Because if these landlords can't be bothered with it, then they're just going to, I speak to them all the time. It's not worth it for them. Like these buy-to-lets, 150, 200, 250 pound a month. If you're lucky, like it's just not worth it. And I think both parties going to suffer.
Yeah, I think I agree with you in that segment. Like, I think there's a problem with the fact that, the whole property industry has obviously become a private market. So therefore, landlords can go in, invest in these houses, buy up all these places, whatever you want to call it. And there's been no sort of control over that for many, many years. Yeah. And then now you're coming in and trying to take back or control it. And you've got landlords who haven't been regulated properly in terms of the quality of what they're providing. So landlords get a very bad reputation because some of them provide genuinely awful housing, which is the truth. But then you've also got problems where tenants don't pay and the system is really bad to get tenants out. So it's a lose-lose really. And like when the tenants get more rights, if the landlords exit the market, as you're saying, then the rents go up because there's less supply. So it's kind of a bit of a catch-22, and I think what it nicely sways into is like, then you have landlords looking at other opportunities, i.e. rent to rent, which I'm very massively heavily in, is where you've kind of really, that was your first, as you said, first venture into the property market. So, tell us a little bit about that, and I think it segues on nicely because what's going to happen is that landlords are going to either be looking to do more short-term lets or work with companies and explore these kind of other options that are non-conventional. But tell us about how you kind of got into the rent-to-rent space and did your first rent-to-rent deal.
So this was literally this was just after I'd left the first lettings job that I'd been in for a year, and I'm going into the next company, and I'd come up to breathe a bit more positive mindset, and I'm like, right, come on, let's get a rent-to-rent. And I spent months trying to get this blooming rent-to-rent. Everyone was sick of it, of me barking on about trying to get this rent-to-rent, and I was committed. I was not giving up, and I was at a point where I'd actually gone for a coffee with someone, and I was like, I don't know if this is all that, I really can't get this deal. On Spare Room, looking, this apartment's come up, and I texted this landlord, and I just said, can I book a viewing? Yep, fine. And then I said, can I ask you some questions before I come? So I come, yep, fine. And he's replying really quick. And the guy I'm with having a coffee with is also in property. I was like, I've got a good feeling about this. I think this is going to be your... Anyway, on the phone to him, he's a bit sceptical about what I was trying to do. But he said, tell you what, come down now and we'll do a viewing. So I literally went, at that point, went for this viewing. He's a bit like, not sure. And then he rang me like half an hour after this viewing and went, do you know what, I want to go ahead with you. And I think the fact that I had that lettings experience, the fact that I'd sort of presented myself well, he'd had a bit of a bad tenant before, so I'd gone in and sold a solution, got the deal. So got the deal, I financed the deal, I redecorated the full apartment, paid for everything, set it all up, did have some help with flat pack furniture, but I pretty much did it all, marketed it, and then from there we were rolling. But I definitely think I launched it at the worst time. I got the apartment like September, so we're heading into the difficult months. So as much as December was good, January to March, I remember thinking, what have I done? Like I was barely breaking even at points, and I was like, oh no. But it was good, and then in the summer months it did really well, so it was good. But there were times when I was like, oh my God. But again, it's all lessons, and I think as a strategy it's good. Like I say to you, not a lot of money compared to other strategies, and it's cash flow, which property cash flow this is plot twist, I'm literally starting another business completely separate to property as we speak for cash flow, because obviously the Airbnb's gone, so I've lost that, and
Yeah.
it's so important. But yeah, so that was that. I had it for nearly 2 years. I managed it myself, which I really did learn because you're dealing with so much with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, the plan was to scale that business and have multiple, but it never happened. So I just stuck to the one and then dived into the flips. Well, flip.
Yeah. And so, in that story, where a lot of people will probably be now who are listening to this, is they're probably Libby from, let's say, 2.5 years ago, who sat there, they're like, I've been trying for months as well, and I cannot get through to anyone. Like, what is your kind of takeaways that you would say, like, you know, that is what finally got me that breakthrough, or what is your advice to them there?
Consistency and standing out. Like, you've got a rent to rent is such a saturated thing, I think, now, and it was when I was trying to get into it, but I hear about it from others and I think it is really saturated, and you've just got to stand out from people. You've got to be making more calls all over it, like make ads, say, put an ad out saying that you'll look after someone's property, no fees, no letting fees, like that whole thing, you know, the typical sales pitch.
Yeah.
Be everywhere that your competition isn't, and just go all in those areas. That's what you got to do. And grit and bear it. It's awkward, you get no's, you get rejections, and it really can be difficult, but you're just gonna have to get on with it.
No, I genuinely think that's great advice. I think a lot of people who I speak to is like, you know, if you have 10,000 people who are trying to do rent to rent in the UK, I don't know what the number is, but you have 10,000 people and every single one of them is on open rent every single day, messaging every single landlord in certain areas. Those landlords, one, are going to get sick of it, and two, your competition is so high that you're never going to succeed in that. So I think the line which really sticks out to me is be where your competition isn't.
Yeah.
Like, think creatively. Like, I think, you know, because most people, like you're saying, aren't doing the more calls, aren't doing the volume. Like when I got my first rent to rent, you know, it took me about a month to get my first one, but that was because I just hammered, like I was just hammering the phones, and not even enough to like, I probably could have done it in like a week, 2 weeks if I had a really, like if you make 100 phone calls or do 100 inquiries a day, you could probably get one in a week or 2 weeks. Like, I don't think it's that hard. You just have to do the volume. And most people don't. So if you're not going to do the volume, I think, like you said, you have to stand out and be in other places where other people aren't, whether that's LinkedIn, Facebook ads, groups, networking events, more traditional schemes, whatever it is that you do. I think that stands out massively. So I think that's a great bit of advice there.
Yeah, it's just stand out. That's the main thing, just stand out. And I suppose you can apply that to anything really, but yeah, it's saturated. You're going to have to think different.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. So in that whole period where you're managing your rent to rent and, you know, then you slowly delved into the flips, what was it that essentially forced you, or maybe you've made that choice willingly, that you ended up going into the flips and starting to delve into the BRR market?
I think I was just excited. I wanted to do it. I wanted to learn. And when I used to be at the letting agents, I used to see like a new renovation project that someone had done, or like someone, I remember once had done a flat conversion. I was going around it going, these are brand new. Like, how have they done this? Like, what is the recipe? Like, I want to do this. And I'd always been really excited. And, I was just obsessed, like absolutely obsessed. Just did not stop watching property development videos. And then I decided to book on my first ever course, and I did a course and I left, and I remember just being so excited by it. And don't get me wrong, like the course wasn't comfortable because, you know, I was young. I went to the Midlands for it, and it was probably the first ever time that I'd gone into like a room by myself, and it was a bit daunting, a bit scary. I didn't know anyone, and it took a lot for me to actually book on. And I left and I thought, right, if you can do something that difficult, for me personally anyway, because I'm not like someone that loves events or things like that. I know I've spoken at events, but like for that, at that point it was scary. I thought, right, you can do this. So I did spend a long time researching it and like learning the flip side, till I got to a point where I was like, right, you're going to have to somehow get one. And I didn't know how, because I didn't have the money. I didn't know how I was going to do it. But I just thought, you need to do this now. Like, come on. So I started looking at, I just believed if I could bring value, I knew that I could do it. And a family member actually had seen, I'd started going on some viewings and having a look around properties and all while documenting on social media and stuff. So family starting to talk, and they actually said, "Look, now how did it work? Yeah, I think that no, I went on a viewing for a property, and I fell in love with it. I was like, this has got so much potential." And then I started speaking to family about it, and they were like, "Show us the numbers." Showed the numbers, and they were like, "I'll invest with you." So that's where Project Pre-Sort came about, and that's how I got it. And I remember at the time thinking, this is probably about this time last year actually, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. And I knew it was a good deal, but I actually had a friend at the time that was interested in investing with me. I think he was in Dubai or something at the time. There was some sort of complication, so I've been talking about it, saying, oh, like, I've spoken to so and so, they're interested in doing a flip with me, and they've got the money, and I'm going to do the work as a JV. And they weren't like answering, and I knew I needed to move quick on this because it was like a really desperate to sell vendor. So then that's how it came about, really. Like, family got involved, and I did that. But now I'm in a position where I'm like, I don't want to do it with family again, which
Okay.
happy to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. Well, I was going to ask how you structured the joint venture, but I think that's on the topic of joint venture, there's one, how you structured it. Would love to hear that. And also your experience of doing that with a family member.
Yeah, of course. So joint venture, they brought all the capital. I essentially found the deal, dealt with all the conveyancing, did all the refurb and all the exit. They had like no involvement. So it was fully as if I was doing it just as mine, but essentially their money, and then just a
Yeah.
straight split.
So
So
was it just a straight split on the profits?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
But I think working with family, people had warned me, and not that there was fallouts or that there was problems in that sense. Like, I think a lot of people probably would, but that person, I think, really struggled when times got stressful and saw it in me when I was stressed at times, and they didn't cope well with investing in property. As much as like the things that we were facing were completely normal, there are times when so and so doesn't turn up. Like, I had an absolute disaster with an electrician, tilers trying to walk off site, plasterers aren't turning up, and it delays the project, and it is stressful. And I think they picked up on a bit of that stress, or they'd come round and have a look round and they'd be like, oh, like, are we still on track and stuff? And I'd be like, yep, no, we're still on track. But they were like, right, okay, because there was so much to do with this house. Like, honestly, anyone's been in it has been like, that is a big first project. It's nearly 2,000 square feet. It was a big house, and there was a lot going on. It hadn't been touched since the 1960s, and it was carnage. Like, it was carnage. So I decided, I remember at the time thinking, I'm not doing this again with them. Like, I'm not prepared. They're a naturally stressed person, and I think it was a bit too much back then. But not that I was involving them, because it was fully me dealing with it. But they just naturally picked up,
Worry.
like, yeah, and they
But
just heard things.
Would you say that that was more a lesson of, like, I think a very important thing in business is not necessarily, because you can say it's your family member or not, but it's almost more your, like, who is your client profile, or in this case, your investor profile. So whether they were a family member or not, it could have potentially been that if you had have worked with an investor profile that was more experienced or chilled or laid back, you wouldn't have had that potential. So I think, like, one of the things that I would ask you and also advise to other people is, like, very much think about the client profile and who you want to work with, because I've done it with landlords. I've worked with landlords and they're so stingy that I'm never going to work with these type of landlords again, because they don't cough up a penny for anything, and that's really tough to manage. And the same of managing the relationship, potentially that was what caused that struggle.
Yeah,
But I think that's a great lesson to take away from it.
definitely. And it's interesting because someone else has actually been saying to me, like, Libby, you need to create an avatar of who is the sort of client, like, well, who is the person you want to be investing in these projects? Like, what are they doing day to day? Where are they? What are they eating? Like, literally get in their brain. And I'm like, he has got a point. And I get what he's trying to do, and I think it's so important. And I read something the other day, and it was like, don't just put in the work, you need to, like, get inside your ideal person's head and figure out a strategy to match that and come up to that level. And I was like, that is so true. And do you know what? Like, I do feel like I can solve a problem and add value to someone that wants to invest life. Like, I genuinely believe that. And the feedback on this flip I've done has been absolutely insane. And we've done it. Like, we've done it. Yes, it's stressful. Property is not smooth. And I think, for example, the person that I was working with is quite like chilled life, like, you know, not around that stress, not like they've not had like a business either where it's been that high intensity. Whereas I look at other people who I've had conversations with others about problems that I face, and they're like, oh, right. And it's like nothing. It's like nothing to them.
Yeah, it's just like, just do this. Yeah.
Just find a solution, you'll be fine. Like, speak to so-and-so. Whereas they were very, like, wow, an anxious person. So, and I think that affected me. And then I started being like, I can't express if I'm stressed, or I can't express if I'm feeling it a bit, because when I said previously about like I don't allow myself to crumble, I don't, but it don't mean it doesn't still get to me. Or like after I've solved a problem, I'm there at home thinking, oh my God, like, wow, I'm stressed. Like, and I do feel stressed at times. I get the solution, but it's still stressful, and it sometimes does get a lot, and sometimes too much. But then I felt like I couldn't even like speak to other family or friends about what I had going on. And yeah, it was a lot to deal with for me, because obviously I was doing it for the first time as well while working with them. And they say now, they genuinely say, like, we think you did an unbelievable job, like, well done, because I think a lot of people would have really struggled and stuff. And I don't know if that's because they're not used to that and like not used to people that would have done it, or if they genuinely think that or what. But they do say now, like, you got us out of some like big situations. And I'm like, well, we had to, like, there was no option. Yeah, that's basically where I was at.
No, I think that's super interesting. And I think, like, you know, for your next flip, when those problems occur again, you're going to be much more well equipped to handle them, and that stress doesn't really become as much of a factor anymore.
Definitely.
But talk us through a little bit of the process then for people who've never done a flip or anything like that, like the purchasing process, you know, the actual refurb, how long that kind of took, and how you then plan to exit in that process as well. Just kind of the whole run through would be.
The short answer, it took too long. Everything takes too long. Everything takes like longer than you think, and I'm learning that I'm an impatient person. So offer accepted around this time last year, I think, don't quote me on it, I think it was June. It was after my birthday, so it must have been June or July. Offer accepted, completed on the 4th of October, so it was in conveyancing for a fair few months.
That's a long time.
It felt a while, but I wasn't bothered, because I was actually on holiday just before I got the keys. But don't tell anyone that, because I was putting on the pressure to the solicitor, because I was like, I want to complete. I think I was in Portugal. So I get the keys and straight in with the refurb. The refurb took from October to late February, I think. So what's that? October, November, December, January, February.
About 5 months, 6 months.
Yeah, about 5 months. I wanted it on the market in February, so it was a bit delayed. I think I had it on a bridge, by the way, so anyone that's been on a bridge will know it's a little bit stressful. You're signing your life away, you're doing your personal guarantees, you sat in the solicitor's office, and it is intense. I won't lie. And I think I got the keys and I just absolutely ran with it, and I was like, right, I need so and so in the day, like this day, that day, and I was really trying to push and keep momentum. But I picked the wrong contractors, admittedly. I'd got some shockers. And B, I think I was too understanding with the not so shocking contractors, the nice ones. I've got a business to run too, who had personal issues going on, and I was like, oh, it's all right, I hope everything's fine, don't worry that you can't come today. And I think going forward, I would be so much more strict, and I'd be like, no, get yourself there, I'm sorry, I've got stuff too. And I think it wasn't until the end of the project I felt like, as I'm paying the last invoices, I'm a bit like, you didn't really care about my pocket, so you're bothering me when you put your invoice in this morning, you're pestering me on a Friday night for it to be paid. I'm just a bit like hesitant because of that experience, and I feel like it really did show me who to and who not to use. So that was the refurb. It took longer than it should have done for those two reasons. And then I actually got it staged to try help it sell. So we got it staged, went on the market, and I had an offer within the week of it going on the market, but because I had another viewing lined up, I was waiting for that. They were really interested, but they didn't end up offering in the end. I think their sale possibly collapsed, and they couldn't offer. Don't fully understand. And then I accepted the first offer, so it did get taken off the market within 10 days, which is pretty quick. And it probably could have been quicker because these guys wanted to view it literally the day after it went on the market, but I did my own viewings and I couldn't actually get there in time. So yeah, it sold quick. It's in conveyancing. We've answered all inquiries so far. It's just a waiting game. Like I said, I wanted it gone by the 1st of July. And I know my buyers have hinted possibly about mid-June, which would be a nice birthday present because my birthday. So we'll see how we go. It's just slow, and I'm impatient, and I'm learning. I've got to find a balance between keeping momentum and being understanding that things take time. So yeah, that's the time.
So in that refurb process, then I think that's some really key things. So what were the big issues, big blockers that you had that kicked up in that refurb process, which extended the time? And also, how do you deal with those people, like where you say like you're paying that invoice and you do feel a little bit like, call it salty or whatever you want to call it, where you're like, you know what, yeah, you did the job, but you didn't do the job how I would have liked you to do it, or you didn't do the job to the quality of what I had. How did you deal with those issues that came up, and then how would you handle that differently going forward?
I do have I'm not scared to have uncomfortable conversations, because either I have the uncomfortable conversation or it's me that's fuming at home that night because I haven't had the conversation. So I'm not afraid to have them, and I will tell people if I think they've not been fair or if they've not done something right. But then I also evaluate, is it worth my peace? Sometimes if I know I've just about survived with you, you've not done the best job. I mean, look, if it was quality, if the work was bad, then I wouldn't accept it and I wouldn't be paying until it was done. But I mean, in terms of if they've not communicated or they've not turned up and been there when...
Hi guys, recording a little outro on here. So we had a great podcast with Libby. Essentially what happened is we had some technical issues before we got on, and some of the back end of the last bit of the podcast, the footage corrupted. So what we've done is we've showed you everything that we did have, because it was such a good conversation. I didn't want to just throw it into the abyss and never release it. But unfortunately that happens. Sometimes technological things happen. It was a great chat, amazing to speak with Libby. Make sure to follow her on socials. I'll put them all here. And if you have any questions or anyone else you would like to see on the podcast, then make sure to drop that below. But yeah, thank you so much, Libby, for coming on, and I hope you've enjoyed at least the parts that you got to watch.